You may now begin your presentation.
Hello everyone, my name is Ethan Doan, and today I'm going to tell you how I started PathoScan and how all you as university students can also start your own company. So my story begins when I was 18-year-old working at the Government of Canada under the direction of Dr. Jennifer Town to build plant disease diagnostic tests for the Government of Canada. And while I was there, our lab was asked to do a demonstration at a show called Egg in Motion. Now, because I have a lot of experience working with children through my association with a group called Heritage Saskatchewan, they asked me to go out and build the demo. And so I did, and we had kids detecting diseases in plants in about an hour or so, right out in the middle of this basically field, as you can see there. Now, unfortunately, much to my dismay, the kids, well, they didn't really like it. They thought it was boring, or they just wasn't engaging enough for them. They didn't get it. But their parents, when their parents, who were producers, seen little Timmy, who's like 4 years old, going out and figuring out what disease their potato plant had, they absolutely loved it. In fact, a lot of these producers actually asked us if they could buy the kit right out there. Now, obviously, I was a government employee, I loved my job, I needed the money, so I couldn't just sell all of our equipment to some random guy in the field. But this really got me thinking that maybe there's a business opportunity here. So I went home and I did my research, and I found out, sure enough, there was. You see, every year, approximately 25% of the entire world's agricultural output is destroyed by either plant pests or plant pathogens. And so to help manage this in Saskatchewan, producers were getting in their car, driving an 8-hour round trip to the lab, dropping off their samples, and then driving all the way home. You can imagine that in the summer, that producer wants to be in the field, not doing a road trip twice a week to figure out what their plants have. So obviously, this is very inconvenient for them. But perhaps more importantly, there's a thing called the disease window. This is the time between when a plant is first testable for a disease and when it's too far gone to be treated. And so you can imagine that that day of travel, the 3 to 5 day turnaround time at the lab, that means that by the time those results get to the producers, they often don't have enough time to actually be able to treat their plant. So this is obviously very problematic, and what we've seen a lot of producers do is just going off things like their weather, what they did last year, or even what their neighbor did. Again, when you're making a $100,000 decision, this is not the way that you want to be making that choice. And so in 2022, with my experience in molecular diagnostics, I decided that I could be the one to fix this. So I got a group together, we entered a funding competition called COHAC, and we won first place. And using those $3,000, we developed the first edition of the PathoScan, which you can see there. Now, the PathoScan works using something called LAMP PCR, which is a nucleic acid amplification test. This means that it is considered a gold standard in both healthcare and agricultural diagnostics. So, to put it simply, this is not some concoction that I made up at my house saying it's good. No, this is something that producers already trust. We're just putting it into their hands so they can actually make the decision right then and there for themselves. And so the business model works quite simply. We offer two things. We offer the Patho box, which you can see here, and we rent that out for $500 a year. And in that year, producers can use it as many times as they want, so you can really think of it as the razor in the model. We also sell Patho kits, which you can see right there. Each Patho kit does 8 different plants for a single disease, and it costs $240. And how the system works is incredibly simple. All you do as a producer is you take your plant, grind it up, put a little piece of paper into that ground up plant to absorb the pathogen DNA, dip that in some water just to wash off any leaf or whatever's left behind, and dip that into the pink tubes there, throw that into the machine, press the button, and in a half hour, if that tube has changed from pink to yellow, you know that your plant has a lot of pathogen and that you probably want to treat it. And so in 2023, with that initial prototype, we were able to incorporate and get backing from some of our earliest supporters, notably Opus, who is the University of Saskatchewan Startup Accelerator and is one of the reasons why the University of Saskatchewan is a great place to start a startup, as well as Innovation Saskatchewan, and some international backing from Heriot-Watt University as well. From there, we were able to use these funds to build our MVP, which you can see right there. And so in 2024, we did about $1.4 thousand in sales. Now, it might not seem like much, but that little box right there actually allowed a producer to save over $240,000 in yield losses by allowing them to detect an asymptomatic infection of Botrytis cincinnati, and because they knew about it, they were then able to treat it. But I know what all you judges are wondering. Well, what if this thing is just a random number generator that got lucky? And absolutely, that's a very valid concern. So the producer actually sent those samples off to the provincial lab, and sure enough, 2 months later, she actually got the result back that our diagnosis was correct. And the results here are actually from a third independent lab as well. So with this success story in 2024, we were able to close our pre-seed round thanks to Startup TNT, Front Row Ventures, and AgWest Bio. But there was still a lot of problems, as there are in any startup, notably that the machine that we were using would basically sort of disintegrate after about 5 uses, so that was a huge problem. And then perhaps the bigger problem is that the actual assay kits themselves were in liquid form, which is standard for a lab. But this means that they can only last about an hour at room temperature. So this is obviously a huge problem for scalability. So 2025 was all about fixing these problems. The first thing we did, completely redesign the PathoBox. We have not had one break yet, so that is amazing, even after a year of use. And we did about $10,000 in sales with that. But we were still driving the kits out to farm, so obviously there's a bit of a scalability issue. So after the field season was done, we got back into the lab and we figured out how to basically dry out those reaction kits, so now they can just be shipped at room temperature. And so because we have all the components in place to really scale up our operations, we've focused 2026 on growth and scaling. And so you can see the sum total of our marketing efforts has resulted in a doubling of our website traffic from last year. So that is obviously a very good step in the right direction. But perhaps most importantly of all for all of you, this has actually resulted in sales. So in 2025, we did about $10,000 in sales, give or take. But 2026, we're already at $15,000 in sales. In fact, this figure is actually outdated because my co-founder just called me this morning when we were preparing for this, and we actually had another sale. So we're at about 17.4 now. But yeah, and most importantly for our growth, you know, agriculture has the one big downside of when it's winter, the plants obviously don't grow, so this business model falls apart. So we are also happy to announce for the first time publicly that we have been accepted into the Saskatchewan Trade and Export Program, and we should begin exporting, or at least exploring exporting options starting in the fall once this agricultural rush is over. So with that, we really hope to be able to ship across the world and find new markets there, especially in Brazil, where we've already had some interest, including from the government of Brazil many years ago, that we are hoping to revisit. So with that, I would like to thank you all for this amazing opportunity to present on behalf of myself, my amazing team who helps me every day actually build this, because you know this is not an operation of one, there are many people behind it, and of course from the amazing Saskatoon startup community that has been with us every step of the way. Thank you.
We will now begin the question and answer period. Judges, please raise your hand to indicate you have a question, and a microphone will be brought to you. When asking your question, please stand if you are able.
There we go. Hi. Congratulations. Really, really interesting. I can't pretend I know anything about farming or agriculture or anything like that. My question's more about the $500 or was it $5,000 a year rental? Or what?
500.
500. Sorry. So sorry. With that, what's the overhead on maintaining that? So if people have issues, what steps are you taking to have people come fix the machines or update the machines? And then also, I find in a world where farmers and producers are looking at expenses more and more, I would be nervous that a rental fee is something that gets cut pretty quickly versus someone buying it at a more expensive price and then owning that. Just wondering if you could talk through that membership sort of model.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's about a 50% margin on the actual device itself. So if someone does have an issue and it does break down, we should be able to cover that within the margin, and we would just ship them another one. The reason why we have actually gone to, and you're absolutely right, farmers don't want to rent things. In fact, we've sold these in previous years. $500 is a rate that we can sell it at. But the thing that we aim to do is to make this tailored to the producer as best as possible. Because you can buy these from Thermo Fisher, but no producer is going to know how to operate it, and they shouldn't need to know these complicated words and a complicated setup. So what we do after every field season is we bring all the producers onto a Zoom, like one at a time, and say, hey, what worked for you? What didn't you like? And so on and so forth. And so, for example, this year, the one feature that was causing them a lot of issues was that there wasn't a buzzer. So they'd have to actually sit and watch the machine to know when it's done. So we added the buzzer, and we'll do it over and over and over again. And then once we finally perfected the machine and we're like, okay, you know, this is good, there's not a whole lot of recurring complaints, then we'll move to that sales model. But really, the rental is just a way to be able to get the machine back and then make sure everyone has the same machine at the moment.
Over here. Thanks for the presentation. I'm curious on your intellectual property. What's defendable and protectable here that is different than what's on the market today?
Yeah, so currently there's not anything like this on the market. It's very much a blue ocean market. And the actual assay kits themselves are kind of proprietary, so no one else can sort of buy that. But even if they can come up with another chemical formulation, agriculture is a very relationship-based business. And so our sort of exit strategy, if you want to call it that, is if BASF comes in, we know we can't compete. We just want to be an attractive enough target that we can cause them more pain that makes it justified for an acquisition.
Hi. I was trying to find out how many farmers exist, how many producers exist. Is this a big market? Have you also considered selling to governments and labs compared to doing direct to customers?
Yeah, so in the Saskatchewan Institute of Agrologists, there's about 1,500 registered agrologists, and each agrologist roughly manages land for, on average, from what we've seen, about 100 to 120,000 acres. So yes, this is a very large market, and you can see that we're selling at the rate of 160 acres as a quote-unquote farm. So yes, it is quite a large market.
I have a question about the pathogens. It seems like each kit you have, it's for a specific pathogen, correct? How many pathogens out there, like how many kits they need to have, and what's the scalability, like what's the revenue generated from the use of many kits in the future?
Yeah, so to answer your first question, there are a lot of pathogens out there, but generally it depends what crop you're growing. So for example, if you're growing canola, you're really only going to be worried about a pathogen called Sclerotinia. If you're growing peas or lentils, you're mostly going to be worried about a pathogen called Aphanomyces and maybe Astrochyta as well. So there are a lot of pathogens, there are a lot of different ways we can go, but generally a farmer is limited to 2 to 3 kits at most in terms of what they would actually test for. And in terms of revenue, if they want to test for a bunch of different things, they absolutely can just buy more kits. We also offer, and I didn't include it in the little book, but we also offer something called DNA sequencing. So we can actually take their samples into the lab and figure out exactly what pathogens they have in their field. So then next year they could buy those specific kits as well.
You seem to be running a pilot project more than a company right now, or at least for profit. What are your barriers to growth?
Yeah, and that's a very good point. So the barriers to growth were the fact that we had to drive the actual kits out to the producers now, or in 2025, but this year there's no sort of limit to growth. It's just more scaling and sort of, making the connections and talking to producers. Like if you want, you can go to our website and buy one of these right now. So that's sort of our limit, and then also just perfecting the product, because something that we take very, very seriously is actually figuring out what the producer wants and making sure it can work in their hands. So, if we start with one producer, we can get something that will work for that one producer. 2, now we have a bit more of a end to figure out what the producers want. So the goal of this is not just to be a normal testing device. It's supposed to be something that works with the producers. If they can plug it into their car, they can go out to the field, they can test, drive home. Every producer that we've had is basically someone who helps inform how we build this. So, that's sort of the scaling. Yeah.
How much do you need to sell to get to $1 million ARR? And how are you planning to make this sustainable for yourself and as well as your, the teammates that you have?
Yeah, so we have modeled out our burn rate, and roughly if we double every year, we will be at a very sustainable level with about a year's worth of burn wiggle room. So that's our goal. And to scale up, what we plan to actually probably do is probably make the machine more of a higher price, because $500 is quite inexpensive. So that will probably be how we get to that point. But yeah, we have modeled our burn. We also very lean. We get shred credits. We've gotten about $400,000 between VC and sort of grants as well. So just our goal is to be as lean as possible and scale up to that point.
Hi there, it's great, and it's great to see that you're using your producers to help you design and improve. I have 2 questions for you. How often would a farmer be testing?
So it depends on what they're growing, but generally a farmer is going to test once a year if they're in broad acre, and if they're in greenhouses, we found it's about 4 times a year. And that's why for our sort of sales strategy, we focus on these people called agronomists, who are basically the plant doctors for farmers. And so they would go and have, let's say, 10 farms under their management, and they would test at each farm so that we can have like 10 sales to the single customer rather than, one sale to a bunch of farmers.
And do you have an on-the-ground sales team, or how do you see your sales growing?
So my co-founder is the guy in sales, and we also hired someone in marketing. So emails are actually a really great way to market. We've sent out about 1,000 emails, and about 10% of them have interactions, and of those, a total of 1% of the total 1,000 have like an actual demo or a sale or something like that. So honestly, it's just about keeping the sales funnel going, and also, just being at shows. Being at Ag in Motion is a huge one. We've had like 2 or 3 sales from Ag in Motion once we have gone as a company. And again, agriculture, it's a very trust-based thing, right? So farmer A is going to talk to farmer B who has bought it and say, hey, I really recommend this. Or at the agronomy lunches, they're going to talk about it. So that's sort of how we grow. And then internationally, STEP is going to be a huge part of that. They're going to do our market research and help us market through the Saskatchewan embassies.
Your time has expired. Judges and guests, please help me in thanking Ethan Doan.